Welcome to another weekly webinar. This is Sara Flack, the Education Coordinator of the Child Advocacy Center of the Finger Lakes. Today, I'll be talking about teen dating violence. To start, I want you to think, what percent of 12 to 14-year-olds do you think are dating? We asked this question of other 12 and 14-year-olds, and it seemed that the majority were pretty close to what they were actually reporting. 12 and 14-year-olds are actually reporting that approximately 72% of young teens consider themselves in a dating relationship. Now, what a dating relationship means to us as adults may differ than that of teens, but typically they define a dating relationship as being with another individual exclusively. I want to share some statistics. 1 in 3 middle school or high school relationships report involving some form of abuse. This is based on a broad self-reported survey. Nearly 2 out of 3 teens that report being in an abusive relationship also say that they never seek help. And lastly, nearly 4 out of 5 girls being physically abused remain in that relationship. Some of these statistics may seem pretty frightening and confusing. Today, I'm going to try and talk about why some of these people are committing these abusive offenses, as well as why people choose to stay in relationships, even when they would define it as abusive. Typically, when we talk about the types of abuse, we focus on physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Physical abuse can include a lot of things like hitting, kicking, pinching, shoving, burning, biting, choking, or restraining another individual, among others. Physical abuse is usually the one that is the most in your face as others observe it. And even if they aren't present for the abuse itself, a lot of times the physical abuse will leave some marks on the victim, which will lead their friends, family, and peers to question how they received those marks and what they can do to help or end the abuse. Emotional abuse, especially in teen dating violence, can occur almost for the majority of the people who consider themselves to be in an abusive relationship. Emotional abuse is also a little bit more easily for others to notice, as it may occur in front of other peers. Some things that we would call emotional abuse include name calling, put downs, yelling, spreading rumors, causing someone to have guilt or shame, as well as threats. Sexual abuse, like in other forms of child abuse, sexual abuse is oftentimes underreported. Sexual abuse includes things like unwanted kisses or hugs, as well as public displays of affection. It can include pictures, whether that's the sending, receiving, or even just the pressure to take pictures at all, or having pictures taken of you without your consent. A lot of these will also fall into sexting. Could also include forcing someone else to watch illicit material, as well as sexual assault and rape. When I ask young people to tell me about the types of abuse, these are the 3 most common, but we also like to discuss the lesser types of abuse that include stalking, financial, and digital abuse. Digital abuse is exactly like what it sounds. That can include talking about someone or posting pictures on social media, spreading rumors, or making threats, as well as embarrassing someone else, or threatening to leak images if somebody breaks up. Financial abuse typically occurs as people get a little older, but this can include things like keeping money from someone, not allowing them to get a job, or sabotaging their work by showing up or calling, creating a hostile work environment. Stalking includes monitoring or following someone and can also include some unwanted gift giving. I'm going to run through 10 warning signs that teen dating violence may be occurring. You may see that someone is constantly putting down others. This could be put downs about what they look like, who they hang out with, how smart they are, as well as how talented or gifted they are in their activities. One partner may appear to be extremely jealous or insecure. This happens most often when we see a partner who has now become jealous of when their significant other is spending time with others. They may have an explosive temper. Some little thing may trigger them, and their response to that trigger may be excessive in nature. They could have mood swings. One minute they're acting like everything is fine and wonderful, and the next minute they're angry and aggressive towards their partner. This can cause a partner to feel like they're walking on eggshells or constantly trying to appease their partner. They may make false accusations. A lot of times this can be tied to the jealousy, but they may accuse their partner of lying to them, sneaking around, or flirting with others. A large warning sign may be that this person is very possessive. They treat their partner as if they're a belonging and not an individual themselves. They may try to tell them how they spend their time, what they do, and who they spend their time with. This can lead to trying to keep them from other friends or family members. They may actually put down the friends or family members or make their partner feel guilty for not spending all of their time with them. They could tell their partner what to do or what not to do, as well as what to wear or not to wear, how to wear their hair, who they can talk to or text, and what activities they're allowed to participate in. They may physically harm you or others. If somebody is abusive towards peers, pets, or family members, it's a pretty strong indicator that they will most likely be harmful towards their significant other. And lastly, when it comes to teens, the number one thing that I've heard when talking to young people is that a huge warning sign for them is that their partner always wants to check their cell phone, email, or social media, even without their permission. A lot of times we hear or see where teens are exchanging personal information like their email and login and passwords with their significant others and even sometimes their friends. And then we hear stories about how that can be used against them. If you have an extremely jealous or insecure significant other, they're likely to make those accusations against you or question you about who is texting or calling you and why, as well as your motives for talking to others. I've even seen extreme circumstances where, because somebody feels that they've been treated wrongly, they then log into their significant other's social media or email and send or post things posing to be that person. And those things end up really harming the other party. Why do they do it? Meaning, why do people feel that it's appropriate to be abusive in relationships? When talking to abusers, they may blame their actions on a variety of different things. In some cases, the abuser actually believe that the violence is acceptable. This could be because they grew up in situations where there was violence in their home, or they have other peers who are violent or in unhealthy relationships. It may also be based on what they view in media, what they've read in video games that they've played, where they've now become desensitized to the violent actions. They may also be experiencing depression, anxiety, and other trauma symptoms. They may also exhibit aggression towards peers, which in the past has come with little or no consequence. And they feel that even in some instances, this aggression that they've exhibited has caused them to become more popular among their peers. Think of boys or men who are very aggressive in their athletics. They could also abuse substances and feel that if they weren't under the influence, that some of their actions may have not occurred. And again, they may have witnessed or experienced violence in their home. So they've grown up thinking that this is a normalized behavior, and perhaps even that they aren't sure how else to treat someone. What's really important to know if you're a victim, however, or if you're friends or worried about somebody who is a victim, is that none of these things justify why somebody is being abusive. The important thing to know is that even if they are being abusive, that the victim, it's not their fault, and they do deserve to be treated with more respect and dignity. So on the other side, why do people stay in these relationships even when they're being physically, sexually, or emotionally abused? Many people who maintain these relationships will talk about feeling that it was their fault, so they take on some blame, shame, or guilt as to why their abuser was treating them this way. They may feel that it's their fault based on things that were said. This is because their abuser has manipulated them or told them that it's their fault. They could also feel ashamed or embarrassed to report that something like this is happening to them, especially if they were seen as popular or strong as an individual. And they may also feel guilty. They may feel like it's their job to help their abuser turn things around or to become kinder in their relationship. They could also be fearful due to threats that they've encountered. Perhaps their abuser has threatened to out them in some way, to leak pictures or information that they've shared with their abuser, to harm them physically or to harm their pets or loved ones. Unfortunately, I've heard plenty of stories, and primarily among teens, where the abuser has threatened suicide if their relationship were to end. They may say things like, "If you ever leave me, I don't know what I would do. I would just have to kill myself." These things create a lot of guilt and worry among the person, and then they become feeling as though that they're responsible for the safety and well-being of their partner who is abusing them. They may feel isolated and alone. An abuser does a really good job at manipulating people into kind of withdrawing from other relationships and activities. So even though they might not be physically isolated or alone, they may feel emotionally isolated or alone as their relationships with friends and other adults have dwindled over time. They hope things will change. A lot of times people in these relationships are hopeful that things will change. If you've ever heard of the domestic violence wheel or cycle, it talks a lot about how people who are abusive in relationships will have these phases where throughout the relationship, they will experience some escalation and some explosion where there's that abusive tactic, but then shortly following that, they'll be kind and loving. They'll apologize for their actions and say and promise that it'll never happen again. This creates some hope that for people that if they just stick it out, that the abuser will improve and the relationship will just be better. In some instances, the victim may be dependent on their abuser, specifically when we're talking about a little bit older teens and we're talking about that financial piece or security piece. The abuser might rely on them to help support their house, their family, things of that nature, or they may have trusted or created this relationship at a time when the victim was feeling insecure or going through a difficult point in their life, and that abuser was there for them at that time. And lastly, they may feel that they actually love the person that they are with. So we're going to do a few short myth versus facts. The first one is drugs and alcohol cause someone to be violent. I hope we all agree that that would be a myth. Although these substances may make the situation more intense, they do not cause it. Women are victims more often than men. What does everybody think? That's actually a fact. 1 in 3 females has been a victim of abuse. Based on statistics, it's about 1 in 5 for males. Jealousy and possessiveness are a sign of true love. When I've asked teens this question, they go back and forth a lot on their thoughts. But most commonly, we would agree that this is a myth. Jealousy and possessiveness mean a person sees you as a possession. It is typically the first warning sign of abuse to come. So although a lot of young people might see this jealousy as flattering and tell me that they think it's a sign that somebody really cares about them, they should also really be careful as to how far that goes and make sure that they set clear boundaries for themselves so that the possessiveness doesn't impact negatively on their relationship. If a person stays in an abusive relationship, it must not be that bad. It's so sad when I hear people say this or agree with this statement because it just kind of shows that they're really not understanding what abuse does to a person, and that just because they're in a relationship doesn't mean that what's occurring to them isn't wrong. So this is actually a myth as well. People will stay in an abusive relationship for many different reasons, including fear, low self-confidence, lack of resources, denial, guilt or shame, and even love. So here's the thing I really want everybody to get out of this. How can I help? Whether this is my friend, a classmate, a student, a client, my own child, there are some key things that you can do to help. The first one is to be supportive and listen. Make sure that you're not forcing somebody to talk to you, but you're letting them know that you'll be there when they're ready to talk and that you are concerned for them. Do not judge them. The number one thing that victims often say is that they're feeling judged, and that's why they choose to end a conversation when they're seeking help or to not trust the person who's offering to help them. You really want to focus on your concern for that person and not on the abuser. So if you feel that you have watched an abusive relationship happen and you want to bring up the topic with the young person, you really want to maintain your focus on concern for them. Why are you upset? What have you noticed in their behavior, or how the relationship has impacted them as a person? But don't point blame on the abuser. This is because a lot of times if this person feels that it's a good relationship or that they love the person they're with, they're going to feel like you're not only attacking the abuser, but you're attacking them as well. They may become defensive and be resistant to listen to what you have to say. It's also a great idea to help the teen develop a safety plan. This can include helping them find resources or a trusted adult that they can go to for help when they need it. It can also include helping to define boundaries, their rights, and their responsibilities in a healthy relationship. And lastly, this tip is more for young people, but I feel like it's even important for adults, is don't contact the abuser or make public statements about them or the relationship. This goes back to point number 3, where you want to express concern for them and not focus on the abuser. If you contact the abuser directly or call them out publicly, this can create a lot of negative interactions for the person that you're actually concerned about. They not only won't trust you and want to come to you for help, but also their abuser could retaliate or take out their anger and frustration on them and just make the abuse worse. Before I go, I just want to make sure that you have some hotlines and resources available to you if you have more information. At the top, you'll see listed the phone numbers for the National Dating Abuse Helpline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes, who can assist and provide advocacy for young people throughout Seneca, Yates, and Ontario counties. And at the bottom of the page, you'll also see a few different websites that have a lot of really great stories, tips, tricks, warning signs, and just generally more information about teen dating violence. Some of them also have some short video clips that you may want to share with the teens in your life. And lastly, at the bottom of the page, you'll see my email, sarah@cacfingerlakes.org. If you have any questions or are looking for some other resources in our area, please feel free to email me with any questions you may have. I hope that this was beneficial, and thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this week's webinar.